Have you ever spoken clearly, logically, concisely, and yet felt completely misunderstood? Or, let me ask you this. What if the real secret to influence is not speaking better, but listening differently? We've all been there, right? You're talking to your partner or your boss or
Yeah.
complete stranger, and you feel like you are making perfect sense. You're laying out the facts. You're being so rational.
The look on their face is just blank.
Blank. Or worse, they're annoyed.
Yeah.
And you walk away thinking, what just happened? Were we speaking different languages?
It's such a universal human experience.
Yeah.
And usually when that happens, when we hit that wall, we blame our delivery. We think, oh, I should have used better words, or I wasn't charismatic enough.
Right.
But today, we're going to flip that script entirely. We're going to look at the mechanics of why that signal actually failed.
Exactly. This isn't just about soft skills or, chatting at a party. This is about the hard science of connection. We want you listening right now to feel like, okay, this explains that conversation I totally messed up yesterday.
It does.
Today, we are taking a deep dive into Supercommunicators by Charles Duhigg.
And this source material is just fascinating because Duhigg doesn't just give advice. He looks at the neuroscience and the behavioral psychology behind why we click with some people and, well, clash with others.
So we're framing this deep dive using a model we call HVP, right? Hook, value, and proof.
Exactly. We've hooked you with that problem of being misunderstood. Now we're going to deliver the value, the actual toolkit for fixing it, and then the proof, the data that shows why all this stuff works.
So consider this your guide to mastering those hidden layers of conversation. We're going to unpack how to identify what kind of conversation you're actually in.
Which is key.
How to build trust using some really specific, almost counterintuitive listening techniques. And we're going to look at everyone from NASA astronauts to cancer surgeons to see it in action.
It really all begins with diagnosing the root cause. Why does miscommunication happen even between smart people who really care about each other?
And Duhigg starts with this story from his own life that it frames it perfectly. It's about a recurring argument he had in his marriage.
Oh, this one is so good.
It really stood out to me because it's such a relatable, low-stakes scenario that feels so high stakes in the moment. So Duhigg is working at the New York Times. It's a pressure cooker job.
Sure.
He comes home after a brutal day. Maybe a source fell through, an editor was yelling, and he just starts venting to his wife. Complaining about his boss, the workload, all of it.
Just standard decompression. He's letting off steam.
Right, and naturally, he has an expectation for how she should respond. He wants empathy. He just wants her to say, wow, that sounds awful. I'm so sorry.
He's looking for support.
But instead, she goes straight into efficiency mode. She says, well, why don't you just take your boss out to lunch and clear the air? Or maybe you should organize your schedule differently.
She's offering solutions.
Yeah.
She sees a problem. She provides a fix.
And they're good ones. That's the thing. She's giving him legitimate, solid career advice. But he gets furious. He feels completely unheard.
Of course.
He's thinking, I don't need a consultant. I need my wife. And she gets frustrated because she's handing him the answer key, and he just refuses to take it.
And this is where Duhigg pivots from the story to the analysis. He breaks this down using what researchers call the matching principle.
Okay.
The core insight here is that we tend to think of conversation as just one single thing. We say, oh, we had a conversation. But Duhigg argues that at any given moment, we're having one of three very distinct, even neurologically different types of conversation.
This is the taxonomy. This is what we have to understand.
Yeah.
If we get the category wrong, everything else just fails. So walk us through the three types.
Okay, so the first type is the practical conversation. This is all about decision-making, problem-solving, logistics, what's for dinner, or how do we fix the budget.
That's where his wife was.
That's exactly where his wife was. She was analyzing data and proposing effects. Her brain was in, executive function mode.
Which is useful, but only if the other person is also looking for a fix.
Correct. The second type is the emotional conversation. And this isn't just about crying, it's about processing. It's about expressing feelings, seeking empathy, getting validation. That's where Duhigg was.
He needed to feel felt.
He needed to feel felt. He was in the amygdala, the emotional center of the brain.
And the third one?
The third is the social conversation. This is about identity.
Wow.
It's about how we relate to a group, how we see ourselves, our social standing. Gossip often falls in here, or talking about the good old days.
So it's about defining who are we to each other.
That's it. It establishes the social hierarchy and our place within it.
So the failure in that marriage example, it wasn't a lack of love or intelligence. It was a category error.
Precisely. a matching principle failure. If I'm sending a signal on the emotional frequency, I'm stressed and I need comfort, and you're receiving on the practical frequency, here's a strategy to fix your stress.
You're just talking past each other.
We are literally bypassing each other. You cannot solve an emotional problem with a practical solution. In fact, offering a practical solution to an emotional problem, it often feels like a rejection.
Because it implies the feelings are an obstacle to be removed, not an experience to be shared. It's like saying stop feeling and start fixing.
Exactly. So the supercommunicator,
Yeah.
that person who just seems to get along with everyone, they're not necessarily the funniest or smartest person in the room. They are just an expert at pattern recognition.
They can spot which game is being played.
Yes, practical, emotional, or social, and they adjust their style to match it.
Okay, that makes sense in theory. It's like don't bring a calculator to a poetry slam. But in the real world, these shifts happen so fast. A conversation can start practical, drift into emotional, and end up social. How do you actually diagnose this in real time?
Well, that brings us to the toolkit. And Duhigg mentions a heuristic that some teachers use, which I think is just brilliant in its simplicity, even for adults.
The teacher's shortcut.
Yes. So some educators are trained to ask an agitated student, do you want to be helped, hugged, or heard?
And that matches perfectly, doesn't it? Helped is practical, hugged is emotional, and heard is that mix of social and emotional validation.
It forces the speaker to identify their own needs.
Hmm.
But, as you can probably imagine, you can't exactly sit down in a boardroom or with your frustrated partner and robotically ask, do you want to be helped, hugged, or heard?
No, it sounds a bit clinical, like please select your preferred interaction mode. So how do we do this with a bit more finesse? What's the adult version of this tool?
For adults, the tool is what psychologists call deep questions. And I want to be careful with this term because deep can scare people.
Yeah.
It sounds like we're about to ask about their childhood trauma or something.
Right, it sounds intrusive, like we're trying to play therapist 5 minutes after meeting someone.
But in this context, a deep question is simply a question that invites the other person to share values, beliefs, or experiences, instead of just facts. The easiest rule of thumb is a grammatical shift. Replace how or what questions with why questions.
So instead of asking, where did you go to college, which is just a fact,
You might ask, how did you decide on that college? Or even, what was the best part of those years for you? If you ask a fact question, you get a fact answer. The conversations stay shallow. But if you ask a why question, you invite them to reveal the reasoning behind the fact. And that reasoning tells you everything.
let's play that out. If I ask someone, why did you decide to become a lawyer?
Okay. If they say, because it's a stable career and the pay is good, they're telling you they're in a practical mindset. They value stability, logic. So you should match that. Talk about the market, career paths, the job itself.
But if they say, well, I wanted to fight for the underdog, or I watched my parents struggle and I wanted to stop that from happening to others.
Now they're in an emotional or social mindset. They're talking about justice and history and feeling. If you respond to that with, yeah, the billable hours are great though, you've just crashed the car.
You completely missed the match.
You treated a value statement like a logistical one. So the question is a probe. It's a little ping you send out to see what comes back.
But there's another component here that Duhigg really emphasizes, and that's vulnerability. I feel like vulnerability is one of those buzzwords that people misuse. They think it just means oversharing.
It does get misused. People think it means, weeping in the break room or telling your whole life story to a stranger. But the neuroscience definition is much subtler and much more useful. Vulnerability is simply sharing something for which you could be judged.
That's a very low bar, something you could be judged for.
It is, and that's the point. It could be admitting you're confused during a meeting. It could be admitting you love a terrible movie. It could be an unpopular opinion. If there is a risk, however small, that the other person might think less of you for it, that is vulnerability.
And why does that build connection? Why doesn't it just make me look weak?
Because we are a pro-social species. When our brains perceive that someone has taken a social risk to be honest with us, it triggers a reward response. It signals safety. It's like saying, I'm lowering my shield so you can lower yours.
It triggers reciprocity.
Yes. The other person feels almost biologically compelled to match that openness.
So if I'm in a meeting and I say, honestly, I have no idea what this acronym means, that's a vulnerability.
That is a huge vulnerability. You are risking looking uninformed. And what usually happens, the other person breathes a sigh of relief and said, oh, thank God I didn't either. Boom. Instant connection. Now you're allies against the confusion.
I love that. It's not about drama, it's about authenticity.
Okay, so we've got matching the type, and we've got deep questions to find that type. But there's a third piece to this. You can ask great questions, but if you don't process the answer correctly, it's all useless.
This is where looping for understanding comes in. This is the gold standard for active listening, especially in conflict. Most people think they're listening, but they're really just waiting for their turn to speak, or formulating their rebuttal while the other person is still talking.
Exactly. Looping forces you to actually process the information.
Yeah.
It's a three-step process.
3 steps, and you have to do all 3.
All 3. Step 1, ask that deep question. Get them to open up. Step 2, paraphrase their answer in your own words.
The classic, so what I'm hearing you say is part.
Yes, but it's not just parroting. You have to synthesize it. If they talk for 5 minutes about their frustration, and you can summarize it in 2 sentences, so it sounds like you feel the timeline is unrealistic given the resources, you prove you did the cognitive work.
And step 3, the crucial one.
Step 3 is the one everyone forgets. You have to ask if you got it right.
Did I catch that correctly, or is there anything I'm missing?
And why do you think that step is so critical?
I'd guess it hands the control back to them. It stops it from feeling like an interrogation and makes it a collaboration.
Exactly. It creates psychological safety. It proves you aren't trying to win the argument. You are trying to understand their perspective. And usually, they'll correct you slightly. They'll say, well, mostly, but what I really meant was, and that little correction, that's where the real understanding happens.
That distinction is so important. We assume we understand, but we rarely actually verify. Okay, so we have the theory. Matching, deep questions, looping. Now I want to get to the proof, because what convinces me isn't just the theory, it's seeing it work when the stakes are high.
It doesn't get much higher stakes than cancer surgery.
No kidding. The book details the case of a Dr. Bafar Adai. He's a top-tier prostate cancer surgeon, and he was facing this paradox.
It was. He's an expert in his field. The medical evidence, the hard science show that for many of his patients with slow-growing tumors, the best course of action was something called active surveillance.
Which is basically do nothing, just watch it.
Right. Because surgery has significant risks incontinence, dysfunction. So if the tumor isn't aggressive, surgery is actually the worst option for the patient's quality of life.
So he's the expert, he has the data, he's given them the best possible advice.
But they wouldn't listen. Patients would panic. They'd hear cancer and just shut down. They'd go get a second opinion from a surgeon who would operate. Dr. Adai was failing to persuade them to do the safer thing.
Why?
Because of the matching principle. Dr. Adai was having a practical conversation. He was talking statistics, probability, clinical outcomes. But the patients, they just heard the word cancer. They were having a terrified, high-stakes, emotional conversation. They couldn't process his statistics because their internal alarm bells were just deafening.
So he's speaking logic, and they're hearing fear. Total mismatch. How did he solve it?
He realized he had to treat the emotion before he could even begin to treat the tumor. So he changed his opening question. Instead of starting with a chart, he started by asking, what does this cancer diagnosis mean to you?
Wow. That is a classic deep question. It's a why question in disguise.
And it opened the floodgates. Patients wouldn't talk about the tumor. They'd talk about their father who died in pain or their fear of not being able to walk their daughter down the aisle.
Yeah.
They put the emotion on the table.
And Dr. Adai would just listen.
He would loop it back to them. He would validate the fear. He matched them. And only after they felt heard, only after that emotional pressure was released, did he say, okay, knowing that your goal is to be there for your daughter, let me explain why not operating might be the best way to ensure that.
And the numbers shifted.
Drastically. Acceptance of active surveillance increased by 70%.
70%, that's a staggering number. It just highlights that you can't persuade someone practically until you've connected with them emotionally.
Logic is the passenger. Emotion is the driver. You have to talk to the driver first.
That's a great way to put it. Now let's pivot to another high-stakes environment. NASA. You'd think astronauts are selected purely for competence, you know? IQ, fitness, technical skill.
That used to be the case. But for long-term missions, we're talking Mars, or long stints on the ISS, competence isn't enough. You have to be able to live in a tin can with other people for months without a total breakdown. NASA realized they needed emotional intelligence.
But the problem is, smart people are really good at faking emotional intelligence in an interview, aren't they? They know the right answer to tell me about a time you handled conflict.
Exactly. They can game the test. So a NASA psychologist, Dr. Terry McGuire, he developed a screening technique that wasn't a standard test. It was more of a trap.
Okay, I'm listening.
He would walk into the interview room carrying this massive stack of papers, and then he would accidentally trip and spill them everywhere.
The spilled papers experiment. I love this. It feels like a prank.
It does. Now, your first assumption is that he was looking to see who helped him pick them up, right? Testing for helpfulness.
Sure. Is this candidate a decent human being?
But that's not what he was tracking. He was tracking laughter.
Laughter.
He wanted to see how the candidate reacted to the awkwardness. Did they laugh at him? Did they sit there stone-faced? Or, and this is the gold standard, did they laugh with him in a sympathetic way?
So he was looking for resonance, for somebody to match his energy.
It's called conversational empathy. He was looking for candidates who could read the emotional temperature of the room and match it instantly. If McGuire was laughing at his own clumsiness, and the candidate laughed too, it signaled, we're in this awkward moment together.
It's a form of rapid synchronization.
And that ability to synchronize, to laugh when the team laughs, to worry when the team worries, that is the single best predictor of who preserves team cohesion in high-stress environments. That is the mark of a super communicator. They don't just broadcast, they harmonize.
Wow. So we have the surgeon using deep questions to bridge a fear gap, and NASA using laughter to test for synchronization. But I want to bring this down to earth for everyone listening. Does this work for, normal people in a seminar room?
Duhigg tested this directly with what he calls the audience experiment. He asked audience members to turn to a complete stranger next to them, and he gave them a script. He forced them to ask a very specific and very intense question.
What was it?
When was the last time you cried in front of another person?
Wow. That's a lot. If a stranger asked me that, my first instinct would be to just, freeze up. It feels incredibly private.
And that was the prediction. The participants predicted it would be excruciatingly awkward. They thought it would be silent, intrusive. They rated their expected awkwardness very, very high.
But that's not what happened.
The reality was the complete opposite. People didn't shut down. They leaned in. They shared stories about grief, about weddings, about just being exhausted and frustrated. Some pairs were still talking 20 minutes later.
So why are we so bad at predicting that? Why do we assume it will go so wrong?
It's a cognitive bias. We consistently underestimate how much other people want to connect, and we overestimate the risk of awkwardness. We are all just walking around holding our shields up, waiting for someone else to lower theirs first.
That is such a powerful image. We're all just waiting for permission, and the super communicator is the person brave enough to give that permission.
Precisely. The barrier isn't the other person. It's our own fear of making the first move.
So let's just synthesize this for a moment. If we want to be better communicators, it's not about vocabulary or charisma. It's about a series of choices.
It is. First, you choose to notice the conversation type. Is this practical, emotional, or social? Just stop guessing and look for the clues.
Then you choose to ask why instead of how. You probe for the values that are underneath the facts.
And you choose to listen by looping, proving you understand before you even try to reply.
It does sound like work, though. It requires more mental energy than just chatting.
It is work. Cognitive empathy burns calories. But as Dr. Radai showed, it's the difference between being ignored and saving a life. As NASA showed, it's the difference between a functional team and a disaster. Connection is a skill.
And the good news is, it's a skill anyone can learn.
Anyone. You aren't born with it or without it. You just practice it.
I love that. It's so empowering. You don't have to be an extrovert. You just have to be observant.
I'll leave you with a final thought to chew on. We often think of communication as a tool for control, a way to get what we want.
Yeah.
To win the argument, get the promotion, make the sale.
Right.
But what if we flipped that? What if we viewed communication primarily as a way to know the other person?
Meaning the goal isn't persuasion, it's just understanding.
Exactly. And the irony is, if you make your goal understanding rather than winning, you actually end up winning a lot more often. By choosing to listen closer and risk those small vulnerabilities, we don't just communicate better. We become better leaders, better partners, and frankly, better humans.
That is a beautiful place to land. Connection is a choice you make in every single conversation. If you enjoyed this audiobook-style summary, please like this video, share it with someone who wants to communicate better, and subscribe to the channel for more powerful book summaries.